Awesome. So today I'm joined with Indri Caruana, a health coach and researcher from Australia, specializing in advanced blood analysis and male hormone optimization. How are you today, brother?
Going good, brother. Thank you for having me.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I'm really excited for this conversation. I love when I can dive into holistic health stuff specifically. I feel like the time that we're in now, as you know, there's this epidemic of cascading health, mental health, chronic disease. And I think a lot of the problems that we face in the world and people trying to look for solutions, we always have to start with the foundation of health, because if we don't have that fundamental health in our system, then we're going to fall back into stress. We're going to fall back into these survival archetypes. So for me, I love to talk about this because I love to encourage it. And I know a lot of people struggle with it. I'd love to get straight into the stuff that you're really on the ball with. So specifically for men, what is testosterone and why should we want it?
Yes, great question. So, testosterone is often spoken about online or in the health spaces, but I think there's a disconnect from the majority of men with actually understanding the hormone and understanding how this hormone affects their quality of life. So not just libido and muscle building, which most men think that it is involved with, which it is, but also how it affects their relationship, how it affects how they show up at work, how it affects how they see themselves. And that's both in the mirror, but also self-esteem and confidence. And so while testosterone is the primary male androgen, so sex hormone, it also is crucial for energy production. It's crucial for, having that vitality and that lust for your partner. It's crucial for when you're in the gym, being able to actually push yourself hard and seek that challenge. And so, testosterone has been almost demonized in our modern world, and it's been hijacked, right? So if you look at the modern world and the modern man, it's literally a low testosterone lifestyle that the majority of men have been almost led into, right? We're desk bound, we're constantly scrolling on our phones, which through mechanisms like dopamine, hijacking our dopamine, plays a role in suppressing our testosterone through another hormone known as prolactin. We're drinking beer all the time, which is proestrogenic. We're eating shit food that's deprived of nutrients, and nutrient deficiencies will get into one of the leading contributing factors to low testosterone. And really, like, this hormone, it has to be the pinnacle, in my opinion, of our health actions. We have to direct our health actions to prioritize optimizing this hormone, because a rising tide raises all ships. And if we can raise this hormone, every other aspect of our life gets better along with it.
Beautiful, man. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I'd love to get into the libido aspect a little bit later on, but just focusing on testosterone. So what are some of these ways we can optimize it? Maybe starting with some of the heavy hitters, some of the things that are really important, whether that's sleep or nutrition or movement, and then maybe getting into some of the more nuanced stuff as we go along.
Yeah. Well, look, your major testosterone pulse will come early in the morning, right? And that's because while you're sleeping, all of your hormones are restoring and synthesizing. They're coming through primarily in the morning. So sleep is going to be foundational for this, right? And we know that sleep's not just important for testosterone. We know sleep's important for our mental health, and mechanistically there's many factors, testosterone being one of them. So sleep, we'll call that like the primary thing we have to lock down, but we all know about sleep. Then one of the things that I believe is overlooked and unaddressed in our society, but especially in men, is stress. Now, most of us perceive stress as purely psychological. If we had a bad day at work, or if our finances are, out of order, we consider that stress, right? Our card gets declined, whatever, that's stressful. But there's a lot of factors that people don't take into account that are stressful in their lives, whether that be working in a shitty job or being in a shitty relationship, whether that be not having a hard conversation that needs to be had, whether that be putting chemicals on our body that we're unaware are completely messing with our biochemistry. So sleep, addressing our stress, and understanding that stress comes in many factors. It's not just psychological, it's emotional, it's chemical, it's physical. Overtraining would be a physical stressor, which I see a lot of men doing. They think that the harder they push in the gym, the better their testosterone is going to be. It's just not the case, right? Because we can only adapt to the degree that we can recover. And so overtraining means that we're most likely under recovering. So sleep, stress, and then, the real pillar is nutrition. Because if you look around, the modern man, the modern world is full of people who are overfed and undernourished. And when you begin to look at the biochemistry of testosterone and how it's synthesized and how it's made, like that requires magnesium, B5, zinc, saturated fats. Okay, so understanding that it's not just about how much protein you eat, and getting layers deeper than just the protein, and understanding, oh, well, I need to have zinc in my diet. Well, where am I getting that from? Sure, there's a little bit of zinc in beef, and a lot of people are, men who are focused on their health are eating beef, but what about oysters? How many times a week are you eating oysters, which is like the most zinc dense food that we can eat. So sleep, stress, nutrition, they're really, and on nutrition, it's about we don't want to undereat and we don't want to overeat, right? So overeating is going to affect our testosterone. Undereating is going to affect our testosterone. So I wouldn't say, so there's a bit of nuance to nutrition. I mean, what nutrition, let's just do this. What have you heard about nutrition for testosterone? Just some of the key pieces.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm lucky because I'm a Czech study like you, so I understand the importance of fat and cholesterol and how that actually, is the main component for creating hormones like testosterone. So I always make sure I have good fats in my diet. Then again, like you said, zinc. So for me, it's things like you said, oysters, but also pumpkin seeds.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, B12. I'm not actually sure about nitric oxide. I make sure I have beetroot and carrots in my diet a lot of the time. I'll put that in salads and things. But when I'm having a salad, I'm having olive oil, again, good fats.
Yes.
But I can just stop there. Like what else as far as like, those key minerals
Yes.
that are really helping with testosterone.
Well, it's I like that you said the fats, because when the beginning of the pathway of creating hormones like testosterone or DHEA, which is an adrenal hormone, or even cortisol, all begins with cholesterol, right? It all begins with cholesterol. And so fats are the foundation. So a lot of people know that we want to be eating steak and we want to be eating eggs and, you know, the butters and all this stuff. But we also want to be eating fiber, which is so often overlooked. I mean, when we eat fiber, we feed our gut microbiome, and then our gut microbiome is able to clear estrogen properly. It's able to strengthen our intestinal lining, which is something we can get into. And this then stops us from having any of these health handbrakes that are going to prevent us being able to make testosterone. So yes, we want to be bringing things in like the key components, like our B5, our zincs, all of this. But we also want to be thinking about, you know, other organ systems as well, and how that how we sort of play the long game, and how that affects our overall health, and how our overall health then affects testosterone. Because really, testosterone, and this is a common mistake men make, is testosterone is a downstream effect of being healthy. If you're not healthy, your body's not going to produce testosterone. So instead of having this sort of myopic view and just thinking, oh, let's just focus on testosterone and take testosterone supplements, it's like, no, let's get healthy first. And what are the steps we need to take in order to get healthy? And that's eating a nutrient-dense diet, but also a diverse diet as well.
Yeah, I love that you touched on that, and I love that you touched on the gut microbiome because it's such a huge component of overall health, like you spoke to. And obviously this idea of dysbiosis, where we can actually have more harmful bacteria in our gut than positive bacteria, and that disbalance, that imbalance, is going to have a cascading effect on all systems in the body. And, you know, even just the idea that the gut microbiome is responsible for like dopamine and serotonin, like a huge portion of serotonin comes from the gut. And then so if the gut microbiome is not optimized, then we literally don't have the capacity to be happy and to feel clear and to feel like we're on, you know, like biologically we don't have the capacity for happiness because our gut microbiome is out of whack. There's obviously a big piece there on our immune system and also some of the things that come up with the mind. But I'd love it if you could just go a little bit deeper into the gut microbiome, if there's anything else there in relation to, testosterone.
Certainly. So let's zoom out and let's zoom out from the microbiome, and let's think of the gut as a whole, the gastrointestinal tract, and let's think of digestion, because commonly we can, and this is a mistake a lot of practitioners make, is that they only focus on the gut microbiome and what's going on with the bacteria in the gut. But there's a whole system. The gut isn't just, you know, the large bowel, the colon, where the majority of the bacteria lives. That's at the end of the system. The gut begins really in your mouth, and digestion. Even though you won't find this in a textbook, but I've learned this from Paul. Digestion begins in your mind when you think about what you're going to eat and when you choose what you're going to eat. Okay, so let's zoom out from the bacteria and the microbiome, and let's think about the gut as a whole. We choose to eat food, and we do that with our mouth, all right? And when we eat our food, provided it's a nutrient-dense, healthy option, right? We need to chew that, and we need to mix that food with our saliva, with our digestive enzymes, right? And then that food travels down our esophagus, and it's the first stop is our stomach, right? And most people call their whole gut their stomach, but your stomach is essentially just at the bottom of your left rib, right? This is where your stomach is. And so the food travels down your esophagus and lands in your stomach, and this in your stomach is a vat of acid, right? And it's a vat of acid for a reason, because it needs to kill any pathogens. It needs to kill any parasites or these bacteria or this fungus that comes in on the food you eat. So this vat of acid is there to break down these proteins and protect you from any pathogen coming through. So you know, when we think about the gut, we need to think top down. How our mind's perceiving what we eat and how stressed we are when we eat, our oral tolerance and how much saliva we're making and digestive enzymes, and then our stomach function. Like this all needs to be addressed before the microbiome. And so if we don't have enough stomach acid, we're not going to absorb zinc. We're not going to break down our proteins properly. And if we don't break down our proteins properly and they travel further along a gastrointestinal tract into our small intestine, then bacteria eating protein creates something called protein putrefaction. And this is a health issue that is going to affect testosterone. Not only that, your liver is also at play. So after the food travels through the stomach, then your liver comes into play where it releases bile. And in this bile are toxins and hormones like estrogen. And this bile also helps us to break down our fats. So if our liver's not functioning properly and we're not able to break down our fats properly and we're not able to clear hormones like estrogen properly, this is going to affect our testosterone. And then, so this is just the beginning. And you know, the gut is the organ that feeds every other organ. That's where we get the nutrients from our food, and that's where it then partitions them and sends them to different parts of our body. And so we can have nutrient deficiencies and, you know, fat malabsorption just from a dysfunctional liver and a dysfunctional stomach, and we haven't even got to the microbiome yet.
Can I just touch on something there? That was a beautiful detailing, man. I just love the bringing the awareness to the process. You know, something that can actually be quite unconscious for a lot of people, and the more awareness we can bring to it, the more we can maybe start to take it a bit more seriously. And it reminds me of this idea of absorption, right? Like I can take something that says 40 grams of protein, but that doesn't mean I'm absorbing 40 grams of protein, you know, and most likely I'm not really absorbing all that food, you know. And so even just chewing the food properly, you know, understanding food combinations, understanding digestive herbs, understanding things that are actually going to help that digestive process. But you mentioned fatty liver, and I saw one of your Instagram posts where you were talking about how fatty liver is actually one of these things that can really stop us from increasing our testosterone or being able to absorb things that help our testosterone. And I know from, again, studying Paul, his work, that the liver can be operating at like 20% and still be functioning. So we can have no symptoms of a dysfunctional liver. The liver can be at 20% and we won't be able to notice it. And so talk to me a little bit about fatty liver and what are some of these ways we can figure out if we've got that, and yeah, what are some of the ways we can remedy that as well?
Yeah, fatty liver is how common, bro. Like I think it's 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 men.
Wow.
Or people. And so fatty liver doesn't come from eating fat. It comes from drinking booze too much. It comes from having too much sugar, you know, and you know, utilizing the sugar that when, you know, through exercise or, you know, movement and things like this. And so over time, our liver begins to store this, fat on it, visceral fat. And when the liver begins to store visceral fat and begins to become fatty, that can occur even in lean men, even in lean people, right? So you might still have your abs showing, but your liver is storing fat. Okay, and this is like, you know, not even in ripped people, but you know, you've seen and heard of skinny fat, and you know, people think, oh, I can eat whatever I want. Well, maybe when you look in the mirror, it looks like you can eat everything you want, but your organs are telling a different story. And so when there's fat on the liver, it's going to impair stage 2 detoxification, which is again the metabolism and clearance of hormones, and it's also going to increase something known as sex hormone binding globulin. Now, as the name suggests, this is a protein that binds to your free testosterone. So when we look at our blood test and we have our total testosterone, that's the total amount of testosterone in our body, but we also have a calculation which is free testosterone, and that is taken from our total testosterone, and then it takes into account another protein, albumin, and of course sex hormone binding globulin. And so if our liver's dysfunctional, it's going to produce more, or even our gut, and our liver is a part of the gut, is going to produce more sex hormone binding globulin, and that's going to then bind to our total testosterone, render it pretty much ineffective. And so we may have good nutrition, we may have good testosterone synthesis and have high testosterone total, but if our liver's dysfunctional, then and there's too much sex hormone binding globulin, then it's going to render that ineffective, and we're not going to be able to have that circulating testosterone binding to cells and eliciting its effects on, you know, muscle growth, libido, mood, and all of these things.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. I was gonna wait. I've got all these signposts in my mind of things I want to talk about, and I think it's a good idea to maybe talk into the blood analysis stuff now, because when it comes to nutrition, and I've only done the level 1 holistic lifestyle coaching with Paul Chick. And so when it comes to diet, a lot of the time it's about tuning in with the body, right? So we might do an elimination diet, we might do a rotation diet. So, you know, you're eating the same protein, carbs, and fats every day, 3 times a day, and then you're tracking how you feel, and then you're doing a different meal the next day, and you do that 4 different times. But then it really takes a lot of awareness for the client to actually track what's going on for them, how they feel when they're eating certain foods. It takes quite a lot of discipline to do this, and more I'm seeing, you know, people like yourself who are encouraging me to, you know, have a look at some of the blood analyses, because this can tell you where you're deficient and where you're okay, and you don't have to kind of work it out with simply how you feel and this kind of guessing game. It's kind of like you spoke to with zinc. It's like, I can feel good and I'm still not sure if I'm getting enough zinc or not, where if I look at the blood analysis, I can be like, oh, actually, you know, I can do with a lot more zinc, and maybe I should start adding that into my diet. Although what you've been saying is we have to really be precise with how we're doing the blood analysis, because maybe if I get it at the wrong time, it's going to show different results. So yeah, please speak into the whole blood analysis system, and what you've found with using this with your clients.
Yeah. First, just to circle back to what you mentioned about Paul's work with the rotation diet and you know, how he looks at things as the equatorial type or the polar type or the multi-dimensional type, or whichever one it is, you know, basing what you eat off your ancestry. Like, that has what you need to eat is relying on multiple things, right? And your genetics is a huge part of that. And we don't need to get into it today, but, you know, you can test your genetics and see if you have a SMP, a semi-nucleotide polymorphism, and that increases your need. So I might need 10 times the amount of B9 that you need, right? So your genetics play a role, definitely. And the way Paul's mapped out, you know, understanding that and understanding the rotation diet is just fucking brilliant, because he's able to help so many people through a book or through a course, because he gives them this very generalized roadmap. And that's being able to help the masses through that is why he is, you know, the godfather of holistic health, and why he's changed so many people's lives. The opposite of that generalistic approach is the specific approach, and that's focusing on the individual. And that's where blood analysis allows us to do, because your physiology is unlike anybody else's. And so when we test your blood, and we test your blood correctly, as you touched on, right? When we look at this through systems physiology, kind of how I mentioned with the gut, when we look at it as taking into account everything that's going on in your life, symptoms, stresses, your daily schedule, we take all that into account along with it. Then we get a very specific understanding of chyle. And so through the bloods, we can test the most basic panels, which is a comprehensive metabolic panel and a complete blood count, like the two most basic panels. And we can see, when we know how to look at bloods, we can see things like B vitamin deficiencies by looking at the size of your red blood cells. We can see things like zinc deficiencies by looking at your white blood cells and an enzyme known as alkaline phosphatase. So just through looking at the labs, we can begin to see, you're actually most likely nutrient deficient. This is why you have low energy, because you're B vitamin deficient. And so through the labs, we get a very specific understanding of what's going on with your physiology, not just about nutrient deficiencies, but about inflammation, about how your liver's functioning, fatty liver. There's patterns for all of these things. And so the way that I look at blood work is very different to the way conventional practitioners will look at it, where you might go and get a blood test, and because you've gone to get your blood test because you're feeling unwell, they'll look at this through the lens of the general population with very broad ranges, and they'll look at markers in isolation. And so if you're not out of those very broad ranges, if there's no serious disease or illness present, they'll tell you that you're normal, but that just isn't the case. Or they'll tell you your iron's low, take some iron. Or they'll tell you your cholesterol's high, take a statin, right? So this physiology doesn't work in isolation. And so it's about understanding the patterns and the ratios, and also understanding what's actually optimal, not just the absence of disease.
Beautiful. And when it comes to like maybe some of the men that you've worked with, what are some of the common things that show up in the blood work that maybe aren't common for people's everyday knowledge? Like, what are some of the things you're seeing that have really made a dent and helped them become, healthier, more energized, better testosterone?
Yeah. So first one would be the gut, coming back to the gut. And something,
interesting,
because we spoke about how the gut impacts nutrient absorption, and you spoke about how the gut plays a role in neurotransmitter production. Over 90% of your serotonin is made there. But over 70% of our immune tissue is also in our gut. And one of the major factors is how inflammation plays a role in testosterone, but also in affecting how we feel every day. And a lot of times that inflammation begins in the gastrointestinal tract. So when I took you through earlier, we went esophagus, stomach, liver, and then the food will travel into the small intestine. And commonly, what I see in the blood work is that there's damage to the intestinal lining. This is something known as leaky gut online. Yeah. And so that's where the tight junctions of the small intestine, remembering this is only one cell thick, it's where they are stuck open, right? They're constantly open. They're meant to be open selectively and let nutrients through, but when we have permeability, the gut is these little holes are in our small intestine, and that allows something known as LPS, lipopolysaccharides, which is a very inflammatory bacteria, through into our bloodstream and into circulation, and that creates a massive inflammatory effect. So one of the major things I see in the blood work is intestinal permeability and systemic inflammation coming from that issue, which I would call an underlying constraint on your testosterone, is the fact that your gut lining is permeable. And that gut lining can become permeable through drinking alcohol. I think there's studies showing 4 shots of vodka within an hour that the intestine is permeable.
Wow.
Right? And so, alcohol, if we have a dysbiotic state, it can damage the gut lining. If we have chronic stress, it can damage the gut lining. If we're just eating a diet full of processed foods and the gut line's inflamed, it can damage the gut lining. So one of the major things I see is the intestinal lining's damaged, and this is causing inflammation. The other thing is seeing that stomach acid is low in a lot of people, and chronic stress or stress in general will inhibit stomach acid production. So when there's low stomach acid, we're not absorbing zinc. And then, in a self-perpetuating loop, we need zinc to make stomach acid. And so low stomach acid impacting how we absorb iron, how we absorb zinc, how we break down our proteins. So that's a common thing. And then, as I've begun to work with men 35 plus, it's also seeing insulin resistance. And so it's seeing that there's blood sugar dysregulation, and this then leads to issues like fatty liver.
Yeah, it made sense that the whole blood sugar spike that people go through is related to the fatty liver. I was going to touch on that, but I love this idea of we're really looking at total health, and if we want to look at something specific like testosterone, we also have to look at how healthy we are overall. Like, it always comes back to that, right? And I think, again, this is why I love Paul's work, because so much of it is mitigating stress. And I remember earlier you were speaking to this too. Stress is not just when we have an argument with someone or something's going wrong, something didn't work out. It's also electromagnetic pollution. It's like, sleeping next to a Wi-Fi router. It's staying inside too much. It's not getting enough movement. It's is there black mold in your house? Is that affecting you? The environmental things. There's a few things that I want to touch on, but I just want to stay with a few more things that are related with testosterone. And I want to ask, in your opinion, how bad is synthetic underwear?
Synthetic underwear, I would say, mate, like one of the, if you want, and this is proven in research, if you want to not use condoms and be infertile, you should wear polyester underwear. Because, synthetic underwear and synthetic clothing in general, but we'll focus on the testes and the scrotum and the underwear. Synthetic underwear, anytime you've worn a polyester shirt and you take it off, you feel that electrostatic zap, right? These sort of micro electrostatic shocks are going through your testicles consistently if you're wearing polyester underwear. Not only that, when your testicles are on the outside of your body for a reason, right? Because they want to stay cool. They don't want to overheat. And so whenever you wear polyester clothing, it's going to increase the temperature of what's underneath it. You will feel that if you sleep in polyester sheets, if you wear a polyester shirt, and then you put polyester underwear on, your balls are going to overheat. So electrostatic shocks, overheating the testicles, which is like, ice in your balls or having ice baths is like a testosterone optimization strategy, because they prefer to be cool.
That's right.
And thirdly, your testicles, your scrotum and your armpits, these areas are very absorbent. And so if we have these plastic underwear on our balls, like, we're going to be absorbing these chemicals and these potential microplastics from our clothing, which is going to impact how testosterone and sperm are being produced in our nuts.
Yeah, man, that's it seems like a simple one to get rid of, eh? I
Yeah.
remember knowing about it for a long time, but then as soon as I went and bought a whole bunch of organic cotton underwear, like not only is it like way more comfortable, but it's also it's the peace of mind, eh? And yeah, I think it's an important thing to bring up because it's one of those things we take for granted, right?
Yeah, and I think just natural fiber clothing in general, it's, Paul speaks to this, man. He speaks to this. I think it's in HLC1, where he speaks to the fact that if you are wearing these synthetic fibers, like you're actually inhibiting your aura from being projected, right? And so, you know, if you go stand on the earth with rubber soles on or barefoot, you're going to feel completely different. And there's mechanisms to that with, you know, free electrons moving and things like this. But you put plastic or, like a running shirt that made out of polyester on, and you go out for a date with your partner, or you put a nice linen shirt on and you go out for a date with your partner, your connection with them is going to be completely different. And this is through, the things that our electromagnetic frequencies and how they interact with each other and energy fields and all the stuff that we can't see, touch, weigh, and measure.
Yeah, I love it, man. I'm really big on that stuff. I love qigong, and so every day I'm out bare feet on the earth. I do some tapping, I'll do some stretches, I'll do some qigong. I think it's good for everyone to have some kind of mind, body, or breath practice. But I think specifically for men, it's really good to move. Something like qigong or yoga, I think really works really well for us. And it's kind of allowing me to kind of go into this next subject. I think when we're out in nature and we're connecting to nature and we feel, the pulse, the life force that exists in nature, and we can feel how that's really good for us. Even just walking around without a shirt on and just almost feeling like more connected, right? And I just want to touch on the sun and like how powerful you think the sun is when it comes to things like boosting our testosterone.
Yeah, I mean, let's just, when we laid down the foundations earlier, I left one of them out, and that is the sun, right? Because, vitamin D is so much more than just a vitamin. It becomes like a steroid hormone once it's in our body. But not only that, vitamin D that we get, from, UVB rays, particularly in the middle of the day, but throughout the day, the different light spectrums that are coming from the sun in the morning when there's red light, how that affects our mitochondria and how that affects our circadian rhythm. So we need to be getting out in the sun, and we need to be viewing morning light and ideally having it on our skin within the first few hours of waking up, ideally as soon as possible, to set our circadian rhythm. Our circadian rhythm is essentially our body clock, what everyone would have heard of as their body clock, and every cell and organ and gland, they run on a clock. And so, that alone, testosterone is a circadian hormone. It's cycled every 24 hours, just like we go to bed and wake up every 24 hours, and as the sun rises, it gets higher in the sky and comes down. So our testosterone is it is dependent on our relationship with the sun. Not just sunbathing and getting vitamin D, but having our circadian rhythm in order and aligned. And then, as the sun as we view that morning light, we get that red light on our skin and in our eyes, all of our bodily functions begin to kick into gear. We get energized, we become alert, our digestion begins moving. And then as we move through the day, we get that sunlight on our skin, ideally out in the middle of the day, maybe not in New Zealand as much, but we begin getting more vitamin D and we begin producing melanin. And then as the sun's setting, we go and view that sun, and that is the circadian signal that it's time for us to begin winding down and turn the lights off overhead and begin, going into that restorative state that we enter overnight. So the sun and our relationship to it is hypercritical.
Yeah, that's amazing, man. I love that. And it's kind of like this return to what our ancestors would have naturally understood, right? Like we would have naturally had this connection with nature. We would have understood that we belong to nature, and things like the sun would have just been these sacred realities, and we would have understood that connection very well. And again, just living in a disconnected culture, it's like, I feel like we can't go back to the indigenous ways, but there's so much of how our indigenous ancestors lived that we do need to return to, and one of them is just sacred world and connection with nature. Yeah, I love that detailing.
And worshiping the sun. They worship the sun. Like, all of these ancient structures that we know from like the pyramids in Mexico to the pyramids in Egypt, like that, they were all built around certain solstice, and when the sun was coming up, and they worshipped the sun. The sun gives us life, and I think that if anyone was to do anything for their testosterone or their health, it would be to begin rethinking their relationship with the sun, and begin unraveling the propaganda that's been fed to them about the sun being the cause of cancer, and the sun being a negative for their health. Because in all of the protocols I write for my clients, one of the major things that we do on the lifestyle front is solar therapy. And that is beginning to expose themselves to the sun more often. And that begins earlier in the day. If you haven't been doing it for a while, you begin building a solar callus, just like you build a callus on your hands when you go to the gym. You build a callus on your skin by going out early, when the UV's lower the UV's lower, so earlier in the morning, and you begin strengthening your resilience to the sun to the point where you can be out there at higher UV points of the day and absorb all that vitamin D without it being detrimental and without burning.
Powerful, man. I love that. Yeah, recently I went on a camping trip with a whole bunch of friends, and I took my son, and you're right, man, like New Zealand's terrible. Like it takes a while for our summer to like ramp up. It's just like cold, windy, cloudy, and it's just like it's meant to be summer. But yeah, we finally got a few weeks of summer, and it just happened to time in with this camping trip. And yeah, so I'm walking around, no shirt, bare feet with my son. We're jumping in the water, we're walking on the sand, and I just noticed how much energy I got. And we were busy too, there was a lot of activity, there was a lot of like social interactions, we were eating food, all the things. Normally I would be a little bit more tired than that, and I had so much energy, and I felt the boost. I felt the life force that was happening within me, and I just knew it was because I was getting all of this sun, all of this vitamin D, all of this like powerful UV light coming into my system, and it was a great reminder. And so yeah, now I'm trying to optimize it a little bit more. I usually walk down the beach for sunset anyway, and I'm pretty good with my circadian rhythm. But again, I love that you put it into people's protocols, and start to add in these habits, right, that are just going to help people gain some momentum.
Yeah, definitely. And I think what you shared is really powerful in the fact that we don't just get our energy from food. Like we get it from the sun, and we get it from being barefoot on the earth as well, with the transport of electrons and how that impacts our mitochondria, where energy is made. So yeah, it's beyond the mechanism as well. Spending time barefoot and with your shirt off outside is a very powerful thing to do. And we're sitting here in front of our computers indoors. It's like, it's the yin and the yang, like Paul talks about. It's it's if we're going to spend time inside, how are we balancing that with time outdoors? Like where are we finding this balance? Because we can't, and it's obvious when you look around, we can't thrive if we live indoors.
100%, man. And like I said, like straight after this podcast, I have to go pick up my son. And so the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to go to the playground. We're going to be outside. We're going to be making paper darts and throwing them off, giant slides and trees and stuff, and running around. And I'm going to be, giving him little competitions to do. How many push-ups can he do and things like that. When it comes to strength training, this is the last thing I want to touch on with testosterone is resistance training. And I know there's also an aspect of growth hormone here. How can strength training optimize our testosterone, and what's your approach now when it comes to resistance training?
Yeah, so we need to be training our legs. We're not going to get the same growth hormonal and testosterone responses if we're going to the gym and we're doing, machine chest press and pec flies and, the tricep pull down, right? We need to be training our legs. And so I always recommend, because your legs are the largest muscle group, you're going to get the largest anabolic response from them. So I always recommend, if you're trying to optimize your testosterone, have some form of leg exercises in every workout, right? Whether that's doing walking lunges unweighted as your warm-up, or doing, a deadlift one day, a squat another day, and, maybe some kind of unilateral work on your legs. So always training your legs. Alongside those, lower body lifts, you sprinting is phenomenal for testosterone. So we can, go on to the track and we can push ourselves sprinting. I saw you were at the track the other day.
Yeah, man, I love it.
Are you sprinting when you're there?
Yeah, not as much. I noticed maybe 2 or 3 years ago when I was still running my kickboxing and Muay Thai gym, I took my fighters to the sprinting track and we did like 30 seconds flat out sprinting. We obviously did a lot of warming up first, and then we rested for like 4 minutes, and we did that like 8 times. And I have never felt such an increase in testosterone, libido, energy. It gave me such a boost. I was just blown away. And all it was just max effort. And then we also started doing max effort hill sprints, which is also really powerful. Currently I have to be really careful with my knee. So I do a lot of warming up, but I love hill sprints, and I'll try and get it in like once a week.
Yeah. And hill sprints really does remove a lot of the danger that's involved with sprinting, because it's not, I wouldn't recommend going straight off the couch or straight from just lifting to doing your 100 meter dashes, right? So it's,
especially as you get older. Yeah.
So hill sprints provide that resistance, that difficulty, without having to be at max speed. But you can also mimic the sprints. You can use the airdyne bike when you're in the gym. You can use the rower. And so I I don't always, but one of my favorite programs for anyone who wants to build their conditioning is to aim to get 2 kilometers under 7 minutes on the rower. And if you can do that, your gas tank is elite. And so, you reverse engineer that to being 1 kilometer in 3 minutes 30. And then you reverse engineer that to being 500 meters in 1 minute 45. And so you can build up with these shorter sprints till you get to you can do a flat out 7 minute effort.
Yeah, I love that, man. That's really cool. And I guess we learn this through martial arts, like the high intensity short rest. And it's actually really good, And I know Paul talks to this as well. A lot of the cardio exercises are actually causing a lot of stress for people if they're not balanced properly. So going for like really long runs, or jumping on the like, I think the walking every day is really good, but long bouts of cardio are not as good as these kind of like full body strength training resistance workouts that we can do, and maybe something like an aerodyne bike as well.
And the endurance through the stress response and just how demanding it is running endurance events, it's also going to fuck with your hormones as well. So sprinting, be like the lion, like be the alpha, rest, sprint, and elicit, that aggression, and then chill.
Yeah. And I think there's this move towards functional strength training as well. Like I love kettlebells, and I did a Mike Salemi's kettlebell course. I don't know if you know Mike
Awesome, yeah.
Salemi. Yeah, so I learned a lot of good stuff with that, and then I started researching different kettlebell experts. So I do a lot of full body kettlebell stuff, but then I'll also have certain days where I do my big lifts. I'm 6'9", so I'm very tall.
Holy
and so
fuck.
yeah, I'm incredibly tall, man, and it's really hard for me to do something like barbell squats.
Yeah, of
But
course.
I've started integrating things like Zercher squats, sled pulls, sled pushes. What are some of the top exercises that you do that are kind of like functional exercises that you would recommend to like most men who are trying to, get in the gym and get better?
Yeah. So what the Zercher is one of my favorite lifts, right? Because I'm a grappler, right? Because you can mimic your gable grip, and you can mimic, where the weight is when you would be actually, wrestling or grappling. The Zercher is great for mimicking that. But I also think it takes a lot of, as you said, as a taller man, it can actually be an easier form of squatting for a lot of people once you condition your elbow grooves. And so I think the Zercher is a phenomenal one. I've actually been Bulgarian Zerchering lately. So the single leg Zercher.
Oh, that sounds devastating.
Yeah. It's good. Because coming back to the functional aspect for any man listening, whether they're an athlete or not, I mean, if you've got a body, you're an athlete, but whether you're competing in sports or you're just lifting in the gym, I think it's important to do things which are single leg or split stance. And so the Bulgarian split squat is a phenomenal one for building that single leg strength and beginning to identify any discrepancies between your dominant leg and your non-dominant leg. But then also like a really good place to start, maybe some people shouldn't go straight into deadlifting, but maybe they could get a trap bar and do a split stance deadlift where there's more weight in the front leg. So those are two. I build a lot of my workouts around those two, and then bringing in a lot of pull stuff with the cables, so the wood chops, whether that be high to low, and you have the 70-30 weight shift across, or low to high. If you have the thoracic extension, you're able to extend through your thoracic spine, doing the low to high wood chop as well. I think they're three phenomenal exercises. And then, for the any kind of pressing, I think if you have a good Swiss ball, so the large inflatable balls, if you can take your pressing from a stable bench to a Swiss ball, a chest press, and do it off a Swiss ball where you have to keep your pelvis up and your hips stabilized and you have a bit of an uneven surface, and then you're pressing from there, I think that's another phenomenal exercise, which takes a chest press from just being an isolated, pec and upper body exercise to being a full body exercise as well.
Yeah, those are great suggestions, man. I love that you brought up the cables. I love the cables as well. And I used to do the Swiss ball with a kettlebell, one arm press actually with rotation.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good one. And then swap it over. I haven't done that in a while, so that's a great reminder.
That's an awesome. That's like I think it's like a stop drop or something Paul calls it. Or yeah, and you have the full rotation in your chest and allowing the press to come through. Takes a bit of coordination, but it's that's where the Swiss ball is so phenomenal, because if we're too gym centric and we're doing too much of the bro stuff, you lose that coordination and we can lose that athleticism. And so playing around with a Swiss ball, playing around with the single leg stuff, playing around fucking juggling a soccer ball, just keeping this coordination going is equally as important as it's more important than how big your fucking biceps are, It's way more important. And you don't want to get to a point in your life, into your 30s or into your 40s where you've been doing the same training routines in the gym and you've lost the ability to go outside and kick a ball, or you've lost the ability to stand up on one leg, or you've lost the ability to balance on a skateboard or something like that, right? And so how can you weave what I believe is functional is anything that's going to transfer out into the real world and out into life and help you be harder to kill, help you survive in the wild, help you get through, you know, day-to-day life, and help you live into your later years being physically capable. And so that's the mindset I think people could really benefit from taking into the gym, as opposed to just, how do I look when I flex my muscles and, you know, take a photo in the mirror?
Absolutely, man. And I know you're a martial artist as well, and I haven't competed in a long time, but a part of my own like healthy dopamine and mind body alignment is just like knowing that I can jump in the ring and do 3 rounds. Like, if you know, if there was a pro boxer or if there was a guy my weight that had a fight coming up, just knowing I could go 3-minute rounds with him and be able to hold my own, just because I love that. And it's part of, you know, me feeling like a powerful man, me feeling like I can defend my family, I can hold my own and all that kind of thing. And for me to be able to do that, I need to have that rotational power, my core, my lower back, my knees, my shoulders. I need to look after all these aspects. And so again, whenever I'm doing any kind of workout, I'm incorporating all these different aspects of mobility. I like things like side plank variations, ways to make the side plank harder. A lot of those exercises we talk to are targeting the core, right? Even V-ups, you know, V-ups are really good for the psoas muscle. And I know the difference. It's when I feel really good, when my legs are strong, when my whole body feels integrated, I can just walk in the gym and, you know, I can still tag people up. I can still be like, I can still be dangerous, you know, like I could go through an 8-week camp right now and be really dangerous. And that makes me feel good, because the opposite of that, the substitute of that, is really vulnerable for injury. And, you know, I start to chase after my son because he wants to race me and my hamstring goes or something like that. It's really important, I think, that we train like an athlete, even if you don't have something coming up. Yeah.
And I think you touched on, or you alluded to something which I believe ties everything that we've spoken about in this conversation together, and that is, it's not about your testosterone score, and it's not about how big your muscles are. It's about being capable and being resilient. And so developing your training so you are physically capable and physically resilient, you know, injury resilient. Developing your physiology so you are stress resilient. You are, because like the perfect conditions do not exist. They do not exist.
Yeah.
And so you need to get, all of us, we need to get our health to a point where we can tolerate the crazy amount of abuse that is coming from just living in the modern world, right? Because if you're not proactive with it, you'll become a victim to it. And that's the electromagnetic frequencies, that's the air pollution, that's the shitty soil that the food gets grown in. Like, we can whinge about this all we want, but and yes, we're in a time where all of that shit is present. But there's also the opposite, which is true, which is we have more access to functional lab testing than we've ever had. We have more access to high quality supplements and peptides than we've ever had. We have access to, you know, the best information online than we've ever had. We have literally access to the best gyms, and there's martial arts gyms, and there's functional training centers, and there's elite coaches all over the world. So you can either be a victim to the modern world, or you can be have agency and see it as, well, actually I can take complete control over my own physical capability and my own physical resilience.
Absolutely, man. 100 years ago, a man named Rudolf Steiner, he was a mystic and a clairvoyant, and he predicted a lot of things that were going on right now, and he was bang on. And he said, in the time that we're in now, all available sacred knowledge of all mystery schools and ancient traditions and everything that was going to allow us to take our power back would be freely available, but no one would bother to look. And you can see how distracted we are, and yet all the keys to our health and our success are right in front of us. So I love how you just dropped that in there. I know that we touched on the individual nutrients and figuring out what we need on an individual level, but universally, what are like 5 supplements that you think are just absolute powerhouses that would benefit anyone?
Yes. Good question. And, bringing it back to what we just spoke about with access, right? Access to great things, and also building our own resilience. Like in the modern world, to be our most optimized self, nutrition and lifestyle are going to take us a long way, but we can definitely leverage supplementation. And supplementation has been leveraged for thousands of years. It's, ancient cultures used to break down, different plants and use them as medicines. And traditional Chinese medicine has lots of different tonics for libido coming from herbs and things like this. And, Cleopatra used freaking milk thistle to heal her liver. So it's like while it may seem like a new concept, it's thousands of years old supplementation. And I really believe that with the right supplementation, we can accelerate our healing and our strength and health optimization. So 5 supplements, I would always recommend people begin with magnesium. Right? Magnesium is needed for 3,000 different enzymatic reactions in our body. Our soil is depleted of magnesium, and when we're stressed, magnesium is the first mineral to be used up. So I always recommend a good magnesium glycinate supplement. There's many forms, some of which are terrible, and they're most likely the terrible ones are the ones you're going to find at your local chemist. So you most likely have to buy these online, but magnesium glycinate is a terrific option. And then I also love to pair that with topical magnesium chloride, so spray on magnesium, which is phenomenal for, just a different pathway and absorption, but also supporting us, to recover from soft tissue stuff and help us to sleep. After magnesium, I would recommend everybody use cod liver oil. So cod liver oil is high in vitamin A. Well, it's not high in vitamin A, but it contains a good amount of vitamin A. We don't want too much vitamin A; it can become toxic as well, like all nutrients. But it has a good amount of vitamin A, and a lot of times you'll find fish oil supplements are oxidized or they're lower quality. So a good quality cod liver oil, so we're getting that little bit of vitamin A, but we're also getting a good amount of EPA and DHA, our omega-3s, so supporting our brain health, our mental health and inflammation, but also our immune system with the vitamin A. Then there's a supplement known as black seed oil, right? Which is it's a time-honored supplement. Some cultures would refer to it as the cure for everything but death, right? And it has this active compound called thymoquinone. And this is anti-inflammatory, improves how your cells produce energy, modulates your metabolism, so insulin sensitivity, and also things like muscle protein synthesis. And then, it's also very powerful for your immune system. So cod liver oil, magnesium, black seed oil, and remembering that quality is everything with these supplements. Like it's like shopping for artwork. I like to say you can buy the same thing that looks identical from the original artist, or you can buy a replica of it from Bali, right? And to the eye, it may look the same, but the quality of it is completely different. And so making sure you're buying from reputable brands and things that contain, you know, the whole nutrient and not the whole compound and not, you know, excess shit as well. And then a couple others I really like are taurine, which is it's just an amino acid which can help produce GABA, which is a anti-excitatory neurotransmitter, so it helps people calm down when they're stressed. It helps us to produce bile, so supports the liver in producing bile, which we know is important for breaking down fats, and we need to break down those fats, and we need to clear toxins through our bile. And it's also great for recovery from training and also, you know, preventing cramps, right? So you're someone that cramps a lot, no matter how much salt or magnesium you take, if you take it, you know, 1 to 2 grams of taurine prior to your training, this can play a massive role there. And then, you know, one that's quite common in the testosterone space and something I really like, and I think a lot of people can benefit from, is a high quality shilajit. So shilajit is it's a mineral resin from the Himalayas, and you have to be quite careful with it to make sure that it's been tested in a lab for heavy metals, because it, you know, once again, quality is everything. But it's full of fulvic acid. It's full of other trace minerals. It can act as a binder to toxins. It can improve how your mitochondrial function and how they produce energy. So, yeah, there's a few of them. I mean, the medicine cabinet of supplements is never ending, and there's so many different compounds and nutrients that you can leverage. But those are probably 5 that, you know, straight off the bat, without any blood work and without knowing anything specific about the individual, you could benefit from.
Yeah, I love those 5, man. And one of the ones that I have every day is shilajit. So I always have shilajit. I always have magnesium and creatine as well.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, I just want to touch on some of those ones that you mentioned too. I worked with a client who was suffering with really bad anxiety. And one of the things I did is I put her on magnesium, cod liver oil, and L-theanine. And instantly she noticed differences. Instantly she felt calmer. She felt more grounded. She felt like she'd kind of got herself back. And isn't it interesting how people can spend years in therapy offices talking to psychologists, which, you know, is great, but to really just, you know, support the body with the nutrients that it needs and notice the instant shift in something like chronic anxiety. Also, black seed oil, something that I've been looking at, but, you know, I just haven't, you know, I haven't really got it. But I remember David Wolfe was talking about how black foods are connected with Jing energy. So this is like Chinese medicine. So this is like that deep kind of resilience and longevity and vitality. They used to say, like, in the war, the Russians had a lot of like Jing energy, and they were like harder to kill, you know, and like cold brings a lot of Jing energy as well. But also black foods bring a lot of Jing energy. So that makes sense that black seed oil is really powerful. Yeah, I want to jump into, we talked about testosterone a lot. I want to jump back to libido for a second. And just, and because I think there's definitely this correlation. We understand that the better the testosterone levels, libido kind of goes along with that. But is that the case? Are there other things that can boost libido that aren't necessarily correlated to testosterone?
Yes, certainly. And I think, you know, it's kind of what I touched on before, where we, you know, testosterone is a rising tide that raises all ships, but it's very easy to also get too singular with only focusing on testosterone. So look, when I have clients who have libido issues, of course we want to check their testosterone, right? We need to check testosterone. But what if the testosterone's fine? We need to look at other factors, okay? And one of the primary ones when it comes to libido is psychology. It's how happy are you? How stressed are you? Are you in a state where you are in constant fight or flight, and if you're in constant fight or flight, you don't want to mate. You're purely focused on survival. And so, those factors. Then there's other factors around blood flow, blood viscosity. And so, we can look at the blood flow and blood viscosity in blood work, seeing the average size of your red blood cells, looking at markers like homocysteine. Homocysteine is actually correlated with like erectile dysfunction, so high homocysteine. So yeah, there's testosterone, there's stress and psychology and emotional well-being, let's say. There's also, some of the things that I think absolutely destroy libido is watching porn.
Yeah.
Like pornography is it's hijacking our senses to the point where we will only be aroused by something that is shiny, fast-paced, colorful, extreme. Like all of these aspects of porn are not necessarily replicable on a Tuesday morning when you're lying in bed with your partner, So the level of stimulation is just completely different. So pornography, I think also, like just constant phone addiction and how I'll lay it out. So when we're depriving our brain of dopamine and we're becoming, our baseline dopamine is dropping lower and lower, whether that be from pornography, from scrolling social media, overdoing alcohol, overdoing nicotine, overdoing fast food, our dopamine baseline lowers. And so you require dopamine to control another hormone, which I touched on earlier, called prolactin. Prolactin will rise immediately after you ejaculate. So that prolactin rising is why controls the rate at which you're ready to get up and go again, so to say. And so if we have low dopamine and high prolactin, then that's going to interfere with our libido and our ability to get, erections when we want or how we want. So there's a few elements, but then blood flow is a big one. So, you touched on the nitric oxide stuff. So understanding that we need, healthy blood flow. We need enough B vitamins to make sure our blood's not like viscous. We need to be hydrated. We need to eat foods rich in nitric oxide. We need to address things like oxidative stress potentially in our testicles, using antioxidant foods or supplements like black seed oil. And I think pycnogenol is a phenomenal supplement for blood flow and oxidative stress as well. So yeah, there's a few things, but also under eating. Like it's just another stressor, and if we don't have the nutrients, we don't have the fuel, we're not going to feel horny.
Man, I love that talking point, and so many times now in conversation, the whole dopamine thing is coming up, and I think it's so important, and I'm glad that these conversations are happening, because people who are addicted to their phones and are constantly task switching, and it's very rare that we're in these long bouts of focus, which is really good for the mind, and it's fracturing our attentional system, and that is having that cascading effect on the entire system. And it makes sense that this is influencing things like our libido. I just want to read this quick quote from Dr. Will. He's a microbiome expert, and he says, loneliness is on par with being a regular smoker in terms of the risk on your longevity and disease. So loneliness is killing us just as much as being a regular smoker. And so whether it is your partner or whether it's just like having the capacity to be in community and have friends, it's really important for the human being. And this is a big reason why I teach things like meditation, mind, body, breath practices. Meditation's not for everyone, but that's because it's the crown jewel of all spiritual development. Meditation is really the bridge to source. It's the bridge to the universe. It's being able to see this incredible, profound realm that we're in. But even in the yoga philosophy, it's like you start with pranayama, you start with breathing, and then you go into asana, you go into things like yoga. but really just being able to develop a calm, stable mind, it softens the edges of fear and control. And so many people have this background radio noise of like fear and control and anxiety, and something bad's going to happen, and I'm lacking, I'm not doing that well. And, I just saw this quote from Paul Chicks-Slater's podcast. It's like, you can be as healthy as you want, but if you hate yourself, then you're fucked, And so like we have to go to the psychology. And this is, again, what I love about holistic health and helping people with their health journey is it is a bridge to personal development. Because as you know, when people start to implement habit change and start to try and make these changes in their life, they are inevitably going to rub up against their mental and emotional blockages and start to see the patterns they have of self-sabotage or low self-worth or fear. And a big part of it as coaches is doing everything we can to support them making those changes. Because as you know, you can give people the keys to the city, you can tell them exactly what they need to do, but they still need to be the ones to go and do it. So what are some of the ways that you support them in habit change to make sure that they get the best results out of the program?
I really like what you just said. That was fucking awesome, because it is... I'll get to your question, and I love the question, but I want to linger here, if we may.
Yeah.
Because that's really my personal philosophy, is what you shared around once you do begin to address the body, and a lot of it, because the body is the most rapid to respond, in a sense. Like, you can go to the gym and get a pump and you can see what your body's going to look like. You can eat well for a week and feel the energy coming through your body. And that feedback is very, very, it builds your confidence. It gives you that, like, oh, there's actually something here and I'll pursue this. And so when we address our body and when we focus on drinking clean water and eating micronutrient food and getting the right sleep, and we clean our channel, we clean our vessel, that makes us more aware mentally. And that then brings us into our mental development, right? And so when we address the body first, and then our awareness begins to expand, and we begin to question our habits and our beliefs and our whatever the way we've been living, and we begin to actually reflect, and we become aware of different opportunities and different possibilities all around us. And then through the aligning of the physical body and the mind, that then opens us up to spiritual possibilities. And it's this gateway. The physical body is a gateway. And I've seen it time and time again with clients, and I've seen it with myself. The physical body is the gateway to a spiritual connection. And that comes through cleaning the channel, actually beginning to look at the stuff that's not working, beginning to question everything that once was how you lived your life, and then beginning to have synchronicities and different experiences that connect you with the non-physical. And so coming back to your question on how I help clients, bro, everyone is different. And so in a protocol, there are foods to focus on, foods to avoid, example days of eating, explanations on exactly why we're doing everything, supplement programs listing, the exact supplement to take, the timing, the dosage, lifestyle processes around circadian rhythm and sleep and all of this stuff, right? And everyone's different. But they could have the perfect protocol, but if their mind isn't right, if they don't have the belief in themselves to action it, or they are stuck in self-defeating spirals, the protocol doesn't mean shit. So understanding the individual is is the first way that I help any of my clients. And understanding this individual has 3 kids, he's running a business, he doesn't have time for fucking, the majority of the stuff that I would give to someone who's 25, working 3 days a week or something like that, So understanding the individual, their physiology from blood work, and their story from everything that they tell me through questionnaires and consultations, that's how I help my clients.
Dude, that's amazing. Yeah, I love that. And I love how we've just brought it back to that individuality and actually connecting with people. And that's why the holistic approach and having coaches like us is so important, because we have also the intuition and the discernment to meet people where they are and to learn how to connect with someone and use the right knowledge at the right time. And that's how you get results. Dude, this has been a phenomenal podcast, man. I really enjoyed it. We've covered so much. I actually had a few extra questions that I wanted to ask you, but I am aware that I actually have to pick up my son pretty soon. So we're going to have to,
of course.
Yeah, we're going to have to cut it short. But this has been amazing, bro. If there's any links that you have for your own coaching or anything that you have, I will chuck that in the description and stuff. But yeah, I just want to say thanks for the work that you do. And thanks for joining me today on this podcast.
Absolute pleasure, Kyle. Thank you for having me, mate. And hopefully we can do it again soon.
Absolutely. I'd be keen for that.
Yeah. Sweet, brother.